God, is that you talking to me? And are you telling me to do this? Are you saying this is your way of handling things? Or is that Satan trying to get me to do the wrong thing? Or is it my own selfishness or my own pride that's making me want to do this thing? How do I know, God? The voices are all the same. And he says the same thing about the false teachers. You have to know me. You have to know me really, really well so that you know what I would say. If you know what I would say, then you will know whenever somebody says something contrary to that. They teach you to spot counterfeit bills by teaching you exactly what the true bill looks like. They don't teach you all the counterfeits because there could be many, many, many ways to counterfeit a bill. And so what they do is they show you exactly what the true bill looks like, every single characteristic of the true bill. And then any teeny tiny discrepancy from that, you'll recognize because you know exactly what the true bill looks like. It's the same thing with God. If we know exactly what the true God looks like, if we know his character, we know what he would say, we know what he would do, then anything that deviates from that, the teeny tiniest discrepancy from what he would actually say, we're going to spot. We're going to spot it right away. Even if we don't know all of the details of it, we're going to say, that doesn't sound right. I don't think God would say that. And you want to know why? Because I know what God would say in that situation, and that's not it. And then you can go home and you can look it up more and you can learn more. But, a lot of times, if we just know God just a little bit, we can spot that and we can look it up and we can learn more and we can know the truth. That's how we know what God would say is if it's something that he would say in his word. What he would do if it's something he would do in his word. It's the, old saying of what would Jesus do? You can think, sometimes we may not have an exact law that says do this or don't do this, but we know what Jesus would do. If we really think about it, we know what Jesus would do. We know. And if we know him at all, we know. And so if you don't know him well enough, get to know him better, right? It's the same way with any person. Think of a spouse or, someone that you love that you spend a lot of time with. You know how they act. And so that's what we're talking about here, okay, is knowing God well enough to be able to say that's what he would act like or it's not what he would act like. That's what he would say or that's not what he would say. That's what it says here in John 10, 1 through 5. It says, this is Jesus speaking. He who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but they will flee for him because they don't know the voice of the stranger. So if you know the voice of God, if you know, when your spouse calls you on the phone, you know their voice. And if somebody else calls and they're trying to sound like your husband, you're like, yeah, you're not my husband, And so he's saying, you need to know my voice so well that you don't have to know the voices of every other person in the whole world, right? All you have to know is what my voice sounds like. And then when you hear a stranger's voice, you're going to know it's not mine. And so that's what it is like with God. He says they will flee from a stranger because they're like, I don't know you. You don't sound like my God. That's how well we have to know God so that when his voice, this verse used to haunt me. I'm like, do I know your voice well enough, God? Do I know your voice well enough? Am I going to follow you when you're talking to me? Do I know your voice well enough? And, that could have just devastated me, but I'm like, I got to get to know God's voice. I've got to get to know his voice. And now it doesn't haunt me because I'm coming more familiar with him. And now I feel like I know his voice better. And when I'm questioning it, I go and I look things up and I figure out, is that God speaking to me or is it someone else?